Hey y'all, another beautiful day here in Texas. My name is Andy. This is Epeius Garage. Today we are going to make a rustic wine holder and wine glass holder that you can hang on your wall. And we're going to do it out of an old pallet. I'm going to go ahead and show you picking out the pallet, how to pick it out, what you need to look for, what you need to think of. I've sold quite a few of these at my markets that I go to, and they usually a pretty good seller. I'm going to show you how to break it down, how I tear it down, and what you need to look for. Basically 2 different sizes you can make. I'll show you that. Making the parts. A couple parts you got to make out of wood. I use pine. You got to have a shelf, and you got to have the piece that holds the glasses. So I'll show you how to make that in this video as well. Assembling it, show you how to put it together. I use pocket holes, but there's if you don't have a pocket hole jig, there's other ways to do it as well. I'll show you that. And finishing your pallet, how you're going to finish it. I generally like it rustic looking, so I'll usually just take a torch, burn it a little bit, and call it a day. Sometimes people request it to be darker though, so you know, you gotta go by that and make it a little custom for them, make it darker. You can sand these down, you can do whatever you want with them. But that will be this video, so stay tuned. Hope you like it. All right, so let's talk about what you're gonna need for this project first. First and foremost, you're gonna need a pallet. I get these generally I get them from a feed store. Feed store has newer pallets, still have a little bit of wear, but I tend to think that hopefully all they've been hauling is grain. You do need to be careful with pallet wood and where you're sourcing it from. If you're just getting it from some random place, you don't know where it's been, it could have hauled chemicals and who knows what else. So that's something you need to think about with pallet wood. You're also gonna need a reciprocating saw. It doesn't have to be a reciprocating saw. You can use whatever saw you want, but we're gonna be cutting this down. Reciprocating saw, sawzall, whatever you want to call it. I like because you can also, sometimes you got to cut these nails. For instance, on this particular board, we're going to need to move this board up in order to get the wine to fit in here. It's a little close. Generally on the pallets I get, I don't have to do that. This one, you're going to have to do a little modifying. You're also going to need a table saw or circular saw. I have a table saw, that's what I'm going to use to make my pieces. You can do pretty much everything on this with a circular saw. Matter of fact, you could probably cut this down with a circular saw. So, you know, there's multiple options in woodworking. You're also going to need a jigsaw. Jigsaw or bandsaw. Bandsaw works. I'm in a little tiny garage. I don't have a bandsaw. I wish I did. But a jigsaw you will need. I've got to make some little cuts for the wine glass holders. Show you later. You're also going to need a drill and a Forstner bit. I used my drill press with Forstner bits, but the Forstner bit size we're going to use I'll get to later, and you could do it with a hand drill. It's not too big of a bit, I don't think, as long as you clamp your piece down. Pocket hole jig. I use pocket holes for the shelf. However, you don't have to have that. You can use maybe some L brackets or something. There's other ways. Again, woodworking, you can find another way. I'm gonna use pocket holes. You're gonna need 1 piece of lumber, pine lumber, about 6 to 8 feet long. It's basically gonna set in here and on the bottom. Size can determine. I usually use a 3/4 inch by a 3 inch piece to set it in here, and this is what your actual wine bottles will set on, and then the other piece will turn into a wine glass holder, and that'll be that. You will also need something to finish this with, so however you want to finish it, whether it be lacquer, stain, polyurethane. I use a torch. Sometimes I polyurethane it after. You can get creative and do whatever you want. One last thing, we will need some 3/4 inch plywood. The length of this, 2 feet, 1.5 feet. Haven't measured it yet because I haven't cut it down. But you will need that for the French cleat system that I use on these. You don't have to use a French cleat system. Again, that's what I use. I'll show you why. They're sturdy and durable and easy to hang into your house. So that should be about everything you need. If there's anything else, I'll mention it later in the video. All right, so here I am picking the best side of the pallet and trimming it down the middle. I do this with a wood blade, and I'll flip it over, do the other side, and on this particular pallet, you can see the pieces were hanging over one edge, so I'll have to trim those as well. On this part, I'm trimming off the top. It's a little long if you leave this on there, so I just trim off where I need it and throw away the excess. Switching blades to my metal cutting blade, as I need to cut the nails to that one piece. It needs to be moved up. There's not enough room to put the bottles into the wine rack. Well, before I placed that top piece permanently, I wanted to make sure the bottles fit. So here I am just kind of getting an idea of where I want that top piece to be situated permanently. Adding a little bit of wood glue, gonna use some brad nails. I want the original nails to look like that's all that's holding it, even though they're not. All right, took this out of the shop. Makes a lot of dust, but time to use the 4-inch sanding wheel, 60 grit, and I go through and get all the big stuff and make sure there's not any big splinters or anything like that. Kind of clean it up. All right, so we have it cut down. I have a rough sanding. I use a 60 grit 4-inch wheel, as you just saw, and I knock down all the real rough stuff, kind of feel around. You don't want any of those splinters. The rest of it I'll get with either hand sanding and my oscillating sander at the end. I'll go to like 80, and I usually, honestly, on this I don't go over 80. It's a rustic piece. You know, that's the beauty of these rustic pieces, is you really don't have to do a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of labor to make them perfect. The imperfections bring it out, in my opinion. Just for instance, like I decided to keep this on this side because it's got this live edge still there. I think that'll be cool. Probably want to make sure to put some polyurethane on this so that live edge stays. You did see I had to move this. The wine bottles didn't fit. You want to make sure they're going to set in here. And another thing I noticed on this pallet, this is a different pallet than I normally use. This one's only going to hold 4 wine bottles, and I'll make it hold 4 glasses. So generally mine hold 5 and 5 glasses. Not a big deal. I did move this, so I used a different blade, cut the nails, and I went ahead, instead of running screws, I wood glued and just used my brad nailer, just because I didn't want it real visible, different screws. It still looks like it has the nails. Again, rustic, remember? Rustic. For real already, I have to make a scrap wood rack. All right, using some scrap wood, I am cutting down the piece that's gonna make the bottom shelf for the bottles. Just cutting the length of the wine glass holder. Make it fit your pallet, they're all different. Rip cutting the shelf here, you gotta make it fit your pallet. All right, taking my template, and I am laying out the wine glass holder. This is where I'm drilling my pocket holes for the shelf. Here you want a pretty snug fit. That's the shelf that's gonna hold the bottles. I gotta get it all nice and even. I usually use my square and make sure that they're both the same on each side before drilling my pocket hole screws. Just testing the fit here, make sure the bottles look all right and it's where I want it. This is my template. So there are 4 wine glass holders. I was wrong, I think I said 5. But this one is still a little shorter, so I just centered it on there. And what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna take my Forstner bit, drill this hole out, and then I'm gonna take my jigsaw, because I don't have a bandsaw, and that's it. To make these holes, I'm using 1¼ inch Forstner drill bits. Here you can use your bandsaw or your jigsaw. I only have a jigsaw, so that's what I use. I just make straight lines into the circles. I didn't mention the router table at the beginning of my video, and you don't need it. However, I use it to make a 1/4 inch roundover. Helps keep from the glasses blowing out with air conditioning, fans, so forth. They won't rock out of the holders. I think it helps. Just sanding the areas that are going to be hard to sand later once you put it together. This part's pretty important. You want to put some blocks there that are going to raise it off of the bottom. It's basically like spacers. That way your glass will fit into the holder. Sometimes on some pallets you won't need to do this if that bottom board is nailed a little further up, but in this case I had to do it. Your spacers being so small, you definitely want to pre-drill your holes. So I always pre-drill them. 2 screws is fine. Add a little wood glue, works out great. I always clamp them so they don't move on me while I'm drilling those initial holes. When applying the bottom wine glass holder, I just use a clamp. I use a little bit of wood glue, clamp, and I generally put 1 screw on each side. Alright, so I mentioned earlier, I'm going to use for my hanging hardware a French cleat system. I am not going to go in details how to make a French cleat. It's really simple actually, but for this video I'm not going to go into detail on it. That is what I'm using. So basically a French cleat is a board, 45-degree angle. One side is going to go to the wine rack, the other side mounts to your wall. It's very easy. All you gotta do is get it level on your rack, and then whenever you go to hang this, all you do is make sure this is level on your wall, and then you simply set it on there. If you've never seen it before, it's really nice. A lot of people use it in shop applications for different shop shelving and so forth. But that's what I'm gonna do. You don't have to drill holes on both pieces. I always do for whatever reason, and I always make multiple holes because I always recommend, and I try to make this as long as possible so that there's a chance of maybe getting 2 studs. Definitely at least want 1 stud. This is a pretty heavy object. They do make some good drywall heavy duty anchors, so if you could get a stud in one of those heavy duty drywall anchors, should be good. But that's that on the hanging hardware and a French cleat. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply these now. Add a little wood glue, level it up, and screw it in. That's really about all there is to adding the French cleat to your wine rack. Also, whenever you're using this French cleat system, these are 3/4 inch thick. So if you just hang it on the wall like this, it's gonna be slanted. Your piece will be slanted like that. So you have to put a buffer piece, whatever you call it. You can call it whatever you want. Sanding at 80 grit, and that's about it. All right, now for one of my favorite parts. So I have it all sanded, 80 grit, high as I went. You just want to kind of rub your hands around it lightly. Be careful not to try to splinter yourself, but you want to make sure there's no sharps. I mean, it is pallet wood, so there can be splinters and stuff. Last thing you want to do is when your customers see a splinter. I try to really concentrate on the parts where people are going to carry it possibly, or when they're hanging it. Once it's hung, nobody's going to really mess with it, but just something to think about. So now what I generally do is burn it. All right, well, that's basically where I leave it. From here, you could go ahead and add stain to it, make it darker, you could put a clear coat on it, whatever you want to do. I generally leave it just how it is. That's the finished product. Turn an old pallet into something pretty nice and rustic. Rustic's in, especially down here in Texas area and South. I sell these. These do sell. People love them. And between me and you, I can get a pallet for anywhere from $1 to $5. And you can usually get 2 of these out of it. Sometimes I make this a double, which is basically the exact same thing, only you leave the other side and you make this longer, your wine glass holder longer. So it's basically the same thing. And then just a longer French cleat. And with the French cleat, you can see it easily hangs on the wall. And that's it. I really hope y'all liked it, think it's interesting. I enjoy making these. And if you're in a market or whatever and you do little local markets and you're looking for something new to sell, this does work. It sells, people like them. Oh yeah, I also sometimes add little decorative push pins. I don't have any here with me right now. Maybe I'll put a little picture of one up here in the video when I edit it. But that's a little decorative piece. I've also added writing or stenciling on here, you know, like wine is where the home is, stuff like that. You can get really creative with it. So that's it. Thank y'all for watching, and please, if you like the video, like and subscribe. That's gonna help my channel out tremendously. And I will see y'all next time.